And it's a great segue because you're talking about hurdles and failing. And hey, listen, that's a part of being an entrepreneur is to deal with the ebbs as much as you deal with the flows. I'd like to take it to some of our panelists on that because no doubt they've experienced their share of ebbs along with the flows. Angel, why don't you give us your take on how to deal with those challenges?
Well, as you said earlier, I started my blog as a hobby, so I learned all the business end stuff the hard way. So one of the stories I like to tell people is when tax time came around, I was at H&R Block filling out the tax form and saying how much money I made doing this and that. And the lady who was helping me out, she was like, "You made this much this year?" I was like, "Yeah." She was like, "What kind of car do you drive?" I'm like, "I don't, Scion." And she was just going on because I didn't even realize how much money I was making. And, I went back home after, driving back home, realizing how much money I owed the government. And, I almost crashed the car, swerving. But luckily I was in school, so I was taking a business class and I knew to save a certain percentage of my money. But I learned everything the hard way because when you run a business, you need to have those stepping stones, and that was a big thing to learn. I had a savings account, which I thought I was going to go on a holiday, a trip. I thought I was going to go, international and everything. All that money went to the government. So I always tell people, make sure you know the back end of everything you're doing, whether you started as a hobby or not, because at the end of the day, you have to be prepared for all of those things.
Ed, you're smiling a lot, so I figured you have something to say.
Oh, well, I think it's just an endless process. I was just thinking about taxable events and financing success probably will come up on a lot of faces of people with experience here. The reality is that in the early days, the more we were succeeding, the more we were having to put into the businesses. And oh, by the way, the surprise at tax time. So it's a simple story. I'd rather save some of the others for later on.
And Ted, I know you have your take on dealing with the ebbs of, business entrepreneurship. Why don't you give us some thoughts?
The beginning of my career was, I don't think there were any flows. It was a series of issues. I had been in the market since I was 13, so I decided I knew exactly what I wanted to do for a living from the time I was 13 years old. I got hired right out of college, fresh out of college for the July class in March of that year, so I knew what I was going to do for a living. But it started out, I got hired at what was then Dean Witter as wanting to be a stockbroker, and the very first day on the job, I walked in and I heard some guy cold calling some little old lady on the phone, and I went, this isn't what I thought a stockbroker did. I thought I was going to be on a trading desk somewhere, and somebody was going to give me a book of clients. So it started out, I applied for the wrong job. But to make matters much worse than that, I had a mentor who probably wasn't one of the greatest mentors in the world, but he was the only successful stockbroker that I knew. Nice car, beautiful house, and he gave me some advice. He said, what kind of car are you driving? And I used to have this car. It was a Chevy, not a Chevy, a station wagon with the wood panels. You guys probably wouldn't even remember those, but there was a seat that actually faced backwards in the car. And he said, you know what, nobody's going to take you serious with that car. You need to go out and buy another car. So I went out and bought a brand new Hyundai, which, I was only making $18,000 a year. So buying a $20,000 car probably wasn't the smartest thing. But then I passed the exam to become a broker, the Series 7. And he called me the day I passed, and he said, congratulations, where are you living? I said, I'm living with my parents. I'm going to save some money. That's the reason why I took the job down here. And he said, no, you're going to be managing people's money. You need to learn responsibility. You need to be like them. You need to go out and buy a house. So I went out at 21 years old and bought a brand new house. And of course, then I had to furnish the house. And he says, by the way, you can't wear these Today's Man suits. You guys probably don't even remember Today's Man. But, go out, spend some money. You'll work harder. You'll be successful just like me. So I did exactly what he said. Here I'm making $18,000 a year. I got a brand new car, brand new house, bought a bunch of clothes. And then October 19th, 1987, the stock market crashed. Nobody wanted to hear from a stockbroker at all, anywhere. So here I am, things are already bad. It seems like it can't get any worse. But my father, who went from dropping out of high school at the age of 15 and ultimately went back, got his GED, and ended up running the entire New Jersey school board system, was accused of stealing money by his right-hand man. The case was completely thrown out, but it made the front page of the Barron's and New York Times. And if you have a name like mine, which is Octavius Reid, and I'm Octavius Reid III, imagine what it's like at the head of every major newspaper that reads, Octavius Reid mismanages funds. And by the way, what do I do for a living? So that was the beginning of my career. I got into a situation, I don't want to take too much time, but if you mind just getting at how I got over a hurdle, I got to the point where I was afraid to pick up the phone. I didn't want to talk to clients because every phone call was a bill collector. I didn't want to call anybody. And we decided we were going to change our policy. The firm, the way we get paid is we keep 30% of the revenues at the beginning stages that you bring in, and over time, that level increases. But the firm decided a new policy to weed out the weak was to lower the payout of those brokers that were producing less than $120,000 a year in revenue for the firm. So they were going to lower the payout from 30% down to 20%. I was doing $62,000 revenue per year, which meant I was going to make $12,000, given the current situation that I was in. And I got this notice 3 days before Christmas. And so I remember coming home being totally depressed, trying to figure out what I was going to do. It's 3 days before Christmas. I can't afford to go out and buy Christmas gifts or anything like that. And as I'm walking up to my condo, there's a red foreclosure notice on my door. And I walked into the house, but I used to have this cup. I used to empty my change out. I've always had this theory, never spend your change. And so I took all the change that I had in that cup, and I went to Cherry Hill Mall to the Cinnabon. And, well, first I tried to go to the ATM, but I couldn't get my money out because they don't give you anything less than $10 out the ATM. So, so I had to spend my change. So I went to Cherry Hill Mall, and I'm sitting at the Cinnabon, and I'm looking, and remember, this is 3 days before Christmas. This is in the 80s when people used to wear those big gold earrings. Remember Salt and Pepper, the group? I don't know if you guys remember that. But they had these big gold earrings, long leather trench coats, and I'm thinking to myself, I went to college for 4 years. I've been a stockbroker for 5 years, and I can't afford a cup of coffee and a Cinnabon. And I'm watching these people carrying about 6 bags apiece, wearing these $800 leather coats and big earrings, getting on the bus and going home. What's wrong with this picture? And I went into my manager. I disappeared for about 3 days. And for 3 days, I actually sat there with a legal pad in front of a legal pad and started writing down everything I thought that successful people did and everything I thought that failures did. And I started writing down all the successful people I knew, and I did the same thing for each of them. And I came back to my office 3 days later, and right after Christmas, and my manager said, where you been? We were going to write you up for job abandonment. And I said to him, well, actually, I've got a letter for you. And I handed him the letter, and I said, I need you to make a deal. If you are willing to, number one, find a way for me to keep my payout at 30%, and by the way, give me a $500 raise, then I will double my revenues next year. If I don't, what you're holding in your hand is my letter of resignation. And it is dated exactly 1 year from today. And he gave me that extra shot. And I came back the following year, I doubled my revenues. And I came into him, and the day I doubled my revenues, I hit that number. I walked in with another piece of paper, and he said, what's this? And I said, I'm going to do it again next year. And he looked at me, he was like, well, you don't have to anymore. I said, I'm going to do it again next year. And I did it 3 years in a row. The third time I walked in his office, I handed him a piece of paper. I never heard my manager curse a day in his life. And he was like, man, get the F out of here. But, I never looked back. And that one experience of hitting rock bottom is what really changed things to make me say, you know what, you can go out and do this. So sorry to take so much time.
No, and it's a great story, and it leads to another topic I wanted to thank you for sharing that with us.